kitchen chaos to well-oiled machines. Get ready for newfangled technology and old-school know-how. Stories and a good bit of fun. I'm Simon, and this is Culinary Mechanic. Today I'm joined by Christine Smith of CS Consulting. Christine, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Um, I think that you and I have kind of danced around a little bit on LinkedIn and found that we've got some pretty common thoughts on the hospitality industry, and so it seemed like a really fun, good idea to bring you on and kind of see what we find.
Yeah.
Um, and to that end, I like to just kind of get to it and say, how'd you get into the restaurant industry, hospitality?
I love it. It's who I am. It's how I started as a teenager, being a
Okay.
teenager at age 14, learning how to be independent. And your family may say, you need to go get a job. That's what I did.
Mhm.
And started in a little ice cream parlor by the beach where I put my bikini on during the day and then put my t-shirt on and went to work at night and
Nice.
evolved from there. And it's
Awesome.
it's been in and out of different variations of styles of restaurants and calibers and so on.
Awesome. Um, any favorite parts of that? If you're running around, you're scooping ice cream. I feel like I saw bartender on there on your resume somewhere.
You name it, I've done it. I've done events, weddings, small parlor ice cream places, fine dining, catering, all across the board. And if you were to ask me that question, your favorite part? I think the camaraderie of just mingling with people and like watching people create magic happen for a guest experience. Like, I know for myself, when I go out and dine or go on vacation, I want to go have an experience. And to be able to
Yeah,
have, both perspectives and play when you're creating that for the guest is really, really something special.
awesome. Awesome. I Yeah, I definitely ran the gamut from, little tiny itty bitty mom and pop restaurants all the way up to these big corporate things. I ran one that was, I don't know, 350 seats.
Mhm.
And I always marveled at like the different dynamics of human beings that, you see within groups. You see leaders like emerge. You see that person that's just they're literally marking time, getting through the day, collecting a paycheck. And I think that once upon a time I would have said, no, no, I want all leaders. And then I realized, no, you just have to have people who are rank and file and that just are committed to doing what they do. But I've always loved that sort of measure of human dynamics of all these different profiles and different characters, I guess, as you'd say.
That's
Um,
right.
how does that multifaceted career in hospitality, how does that lead you to CS Consulting?
It is essentially the foundations of where and how it was built. Accumulation of experience and self awareness, my own journey through the career development packaged into this, I call it CS Consulting or C. Smith philosophy because it's my philosophy and my journey that I share with others and my leadership and how I teach others these things
Right.
within our industry. And so, from the accumulation of what I experienced and how in those moments I knew there were better ways, I just didn't know how to get the results I wanted back then at that time, right?
Right.
Don't know who Christine is, doesn't know how to express herself, and so on and so forth. I have now created this entity for myself, this brand, this thing that I want to, this message that I want to deliver to our industry, and it's the main topic is self awareness and our relationships with ourselves and how we show up in our business.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Um, can you I guess I'd love for you to break it down for me. So you're working, let's just say you're working with a local restaurant or a
Mhm.
local hotel, or I mean, what is some of the work? Just give us an idea of kind of what that looks and feels like.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you a question and then we'll kind of build the story.
Okay,
You come from the culinary side, correct? The chef,
correct.
the back
Yes.
of the house. And
Yeah.
so when you think of, let's say you're the leader in the kitchen and you're trying to get things accomplished or put systems in place or train your staff to get to a certain level or whatever. Within those systems that you put in place and those training procedures that you put in place, there's a key element, which I like to call self awareness and how you're doing it, right? So,
Right.
how are you creating the space for others to build on themselves? How are you creating space for yourself to then lead? What type of leadership do you deliver? Do you understand your leadership style? Do your teammates understand your leadership style? Where is it coming from? And so on and so forth. And so, for example, if a kitchen or a restaurant were to hire me to come in, let's say they say, we've done all the procedures, we have everything in place. And for some reason, things just, there's a missing piece and we don't really understand how to get what we're trying to achieve. I
Right.
come in and I break it down. I'm asking you questions like, what are you trying to achieve? And why do you think you're unable to achieve it? Given what you've already
Uh,
done, because
right.
it doesn't matter what systems you have in place, there's always going to be a root cause. And I often express the term how we show up, right?
Right.
And so, if you are training, let's say from a place of a negative mindset or limited beliefs, or fear based on your peers not accepting that idea or so on and so forth, that's the root cause why you're not getting the solutions that you desire,
Right.
and that's the
Just kind
level I work with.
of pushing the obstacles aside and kind of
Yeah.
understanding what it looks like. Awesome. I love that. I think as a for me, I can honestly say for me as a leader in restaurants and restaurant companies, I I thought a lot about what you just said, and I
Mm.
never really broke it down real far, but I always kind of it's always one of those. I tried A and B last week, and A worked great, and B was a disaster. Don't do B anymore. And so I just just kind of always sort of look and see. And I think over the years, what I figured out is that if I wanted to succeed, I couldn't do it all myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't have employees, is largely the way. And I think that, you talk about self-awareness. I realize that if I think about how I want to be approached, I want to be a part of something. So I was always trying to grab people and bring them sort of closer, right? And as I would talk to young sous chefs or inexperienced sous chefs, because they're not always young, um, I think the big thing for me was, hey, if you manage people towards you as opposed to creating this sort of adversarial thing of employees versus management. If you bring them to you, all of a sudden you have this group of people who you say, "Hey, I need some help," and they go, "What can we do?"
Mhm.
So yeah, I love actually hearing the idea, some of those ideas that for me I are very top level. I'm just kind of skating over the surface. And I like to think that I was a good manager. I know that I wasn't at some point. I can think back to like 2002, 2003 and 4 and I go, "God, I was a disaster." And I was a jerk, honestly. And I think that as soon as I figured out that I felt like shit when I treated people that way, and so wait, I don't feel good when I speak to people that way. Let's not do that. So very self-serving, like let's make myself feel better and then kind of pushing it forward. Yeah, fun. And so how does that manifest itself in like what are some of the things that you're seeing out there in the restaurant industry, in the hospitality industry, that are some, what would you say are the biggest challenges in this modern era?
I think it's very easy for us to get caught up in what's going wrong and kind of scurry around trying to, we overcomplicate things.
Huh,
And it doesn't matter if it's money, it doesn't matter if it's systems and operations, it doesn't matter what department you're talking about in your business, in your restaurant business. We overcomplicate because we live in a society where there's a lot going on all the time. There's a
yeah,
lot of opinions handed out like candy, and it's easy to listen to it without really sitting with ourselves and asking ourselves, does this serve me? Because it's
right,
not for everybody. Everybody has their own business model and goals and values and all the things. So I think the biggest challenge is to really just get quiet in a fast paced society and really ask yourself, what do I really need? What do I want? What serves me best? I think that's the biggest challenge because those are very vulnerable spots to be in to accelerate your growth in your business. And it's very easy to just make a transaction of money to, let's say, you hire a coach or you hire a consultant or whatever it may be that you're trying to get help accomplishing your goal. It's very easy to flash out money without actually sitting even within that space of what are my intentions, what
right,
do I really need, how do I talk to this person who I'm going to hire and really understand if that's the right person for me.
yeah. It, I don't know about you, but I did not get into the restaurant business to spend all my time in a cramped little office. I love being in the kitchen, out on the floor. And if you're nodding your head right now, I want to introduce you to an amazing company called Starfish. Look, I've gotten to know their CEO, Jordan, recently, and what they're building really impresses me. They're using AI to read your P&L, and they're going to email you actionable insights every week so you can lower your costs and increase revenue. Best part is you don't have to spend time digging through your P&Ls, poring over reports in that cramped little office. Starfish is going to do that for you so you can get back to the part of the business that you love. You hit upon something that always, uh, as somebody who does a certain amount of consulting as well, like I've definitely tailored it down so that I'm trying to do a little bit more just leadership coaching with chefs and sous chefs. But having done some actual like go in and help the business themselves in the restaurants, the word that really stuck out to me as you were talking was transactional. And I think that a lot of restaurant owners or business owners, they pay for services all the time. And so I think it would be real, I know it can be real easy to say, I'm going to pay for this service. And but without understanding like their own role in it, right? Um, can we agree that oftentimes it's the ownership that is like oftentimes the root cause of some of the drama in those spaces,
It is, but I also like to shift that mindset. Like,
right?
I like to say yes, and I am going to imagine, and I would ask them, right, in conversation and in the midst of doing the work with them, there's a reason why they feel that way. Like, let's say taking my own, I'll share my own journey as an example here. You may view a leadership, let's say I'm a very hard boss, for example. Let's just say I'm a hard boss and hard to get along with. I'm very direct and so on and so forth. But within that personality of myself, one could view that as being an a hole or not someone that's approachable. But in their mind, that person's mind, that coach, that leader, that owner, in their mind, they feel like they have to be that way to be respected and seem that they have authority, or they had to go through so much in their own life to get where they
Yeah.
are, and I don't blame them. But what they and they only know what they know.
Right.
We can't make fun of ourselves or judge ourselves for how we show up. We just don't know any better
Right.
until we do, until we see a different perspective and so on. And so that person is perceived as a hard boss or something like that, they're just misunderstood. Like, are you taking
Right.
the time to understand why they lead that way? Like,
Right.
there's a story behind it.
Totally. I mean, I think that I talk, my wife and I on a regular basis talk about the programming that we are given in the world, right? Just based on our experiences. So much of restaurant culture, so much of it, go dating back 20, 30, 40 years, things were tougher. Things were very, very gritty, and I think that having that programming and the way that we approach things, as you said, based on our experiences, it's really interesting to see how different cultures and how different generations are like they just collide. You know, uh how are you like I guess I would say within that, how do you feel or how are you seeing um the the different generations? You got we all talk about it, the millennials and the Gen Z and all these different things. But what are you seeing as far as the instead of collision, we'll say the intersection of those generations
Mm,
within your work?
yeah. So let's take business out of the equation right now. Okay.
Okay.
Generally speaking, as a collective society, as a generational gap, there's this thing that happens collectively. And right now, like the boomers will die off and this new form of energy will come into play. Like that's just natural human society. So within the industry and business, I'm a millennial myself. I'm in my late 30s. I now know the difference between how I was treated and how my parents were raised. I now know the difference. Like there's been this shift, right?
Yeah.
And then the generation that's younger than me, it's even more heightened. It's
Yeah.
stronger than mine. I've met people in their 20s and they're keeping conversation with me and I'm like, "Well, they're seeing it. They're feeling it.
Yeah.
They know." I almost feel like you can't I've met so many younger people in my life that you can't BS them anymore.
Right.
They know the difference. And I think the help with technology, this whole AI thing, yes, we're going to bring that up because we're using it
Yeah.
now in the restaurant industry. That generation's picking up on it. And so that's a whole other challenge. Like how does the older generation coexist with a younger generation in the business and make the business grow? Like don't let your ego get in the way. These young people got something to bring to the table.
Uh-huh.
Come on, we're
Absolutely.
all in this together. Like, take your ego out of the way, take your title out of the way. Like, if you hire them and they enjoy their job, what other skills can they deliver?
Yeah.
Ask them.
Yeah. I mean, change is hard, but man, you know, I've had some, I definitely have had some experiences in the last few years where I am dealing with folks who are in their early 20s, and it's fascinating to me how in tune they are with kind of who they are, you know, and or what does or doesn't feel good. And I think to myself, I remember having some engagements where I would look at them and go, "Of course that doesn't feel good. This isn't supposed to feel good." And then I thought, "But wait,
Mhm,
you're not wrong. This sucks." But then those air quotes come out, and we start saying things like, "But we've always done it this way." And I think for me, being able to challenge that and like as you said, take your ego out of it and realize, huh, maybe things have to move, right? And in some ways, they absolutely completely have to. Um, as you look around at an industry and multiple industries where nobody wants to work in the environments that were commonplace, right? Nobody wants to deal with the real bullshit that came from chefs and managers back in my day, as it were, because I am firmly in the middle of Generation X, right? I'm about to turn 52 years old, and for me, there's millennials and there's Gen Z, and there's moments where I used to go, oh my God, what are you thinking? And then I have to stop and go, wait, they're saying the same thing. They're looking at me going, what do you mean? That's an old idea, or that doesn't work for me. And so I don't know, I find it fascinating. I really do. I think
Mhm.
that one of my favorite sayings recently and is focusing on meeting people where they are, because if you're able to do that, if you're able to stop and drop and really focus, you're going to find out that like not only do they have a potentially have a different way, but they might actually have a better way to do it,
Mm.
right? Um, Absorption from those little things in our hands is intense, right? I think that especially when I find the youngsters who are not just scrolling but reading on their phone, and they're absorbing all these sources of information, like they're able to download things much faster than we are in a very analog sense, right? um, it's just fascinating. It blows my mind, like where are things going to be in 25 years?
Yes.
You know?
So you in that story are constantly learning from people younger than you and vice versa. We all serve a purpose in where we are for others and for ourselves, obviously. Um, and so resisting when we resist change, I always like to ask myself, why am I resisting it?
All right.
Where why like what am I trying to create chaos? Do I love chaos? Do I thrive on chaos? Like some of us do. If you work
Yeah.
in the hospitality industry, you got to like chaos. like
Yeah.
that's like it actually is it can be a good energy source um when done in a healthy way. Like you can walk into a restaurant and I'm sure you can relate in some way. I can walk into a restaurant and enjoy the cussing if it's done right. Or I can enjoy the um let's say flip the script. I can enjoy a well-oiled machine. You talk about mechanic, culinary. Like
Yeah.
I have actually walked into a restaurant. Well, one, because I've had experience in it and so I know the difference, but can walk into a restaurant and feel that it is so well managed and led than when I walk into another restaurant where it's not.
Oh,
It is you can
100%.
I mean, it's from everything from the online presence before I even get there to when I walk in. Like the whole experience from A to Z is quite incredible to feel the difference. And I love it. I love seeing a well-oiled machine restaurant because you're just like it gives me goosebumps. It's like, God, they're good at what they're doing.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah, but
I
the guest doesn't consciously know that. Subconsciously, they're like, "Why is this restaurant so good?"
or so full, or how come I can't ever get a reservation? You know, I always I put high expect if I have trouble getting a reservation someplace, the expectation for me and the level that I'm expecting when I walk in is usually pretty high. And so my wife was in the industry for 10 years. And so we will sit down and she'll be like, it's been 4 minutes since somebody sat us here. you know, but also like when it is right, it's like you're sat and then boom, there's
Mhm,
somebody who's checking in with you,
mhm.
even if they aren't able to stop at that moment, and but they're walking by going, I will be right back. It's like, oh, you had the you've that has been brought to your awareness, or you were trained that way to acknowledge people and create human connection, because just that I'll be right back is just massive, right? Because you then start to like, I start to look at how fast they're walking, like, oh, you're on fire right now. Your whole, and then I am able to look at sections because that's what I do, but
Mhm.
it's yeah, fascinating. Then you look at open kitchens. Ah, man, the dance. You just when you can't understand a single word that's being said because it's just all so fast and so sort of rapid fire, and yet you hear, you hear the callbacks, and of course, what was it? Have you seen that movie, the Menu, where
Mhm.
everything is very militant and yes, chef, and I'm like, man, they gave that feeling of order in the chaos such a bad rap that now I feel like when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, yeah, are you one of those yes chef people?" I'm like, actually, I am. It doesn't have to be yes chef, but how about, just calling something back to acknowledge so that the next little sprocket turns, right? So that
Yes.
that machine moves and crawls along.
It's respect.
Yeah.
It's oh my gosh. Uh, But these things are learned over time, and to
Mm.
have the leadership, like your story of eating out with your wife and noticing those things, I'm going to imagine, and unless I'm just going to ask you. So, when you notice that, like, are you in your mind thinking, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes? Are they doing okay? Because
Um,
you can have the high expectations, like you've been in the industry, you can have the high
right.
expectations, but like when you sit down and those expectations are not met, do you get pissed off or do you go, I wonder if they're having trouble? Like, could I help this restaurant? Like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
I can read reviews, like, because I've been in the
Right.
industry, but I can read it from a guest perspective, an owner perspective, and an employee perspective, and go, I can read a review and go, that restaurant might need help,
Yeah.
right? Like,
I think I think if see somebody walking by me 3 times, and there isn't that engagement, and that starts to sort of like that starts to be the for lack of a better term, a canary in a coal mine for me. And I'm probably and now I start to notice other things. But if I notice that everybody's scattered, then I start to look for a manager. And if I don't see a manager, then it's like, huh. And I try not to find myself in a pissed off place because
mhm,
I want to see how it's all going to unfold, right? Like, are they gonna right the ship, or is it just is the food and the warmth of that server when they finally get to me gonna make up for it all? Because I've had that, right? Like, technically the service wasn't very good, but the food was amazing, and the young lady taking care of us was awesome, but clearly inexperienced and not trained, right? And so left to fend for herself, kind of thing. Um, but boy, she tried. She gave it everything she had, to welcome somebody into her momentary existence. And so I appreciate that. I think it's the apathy that, if I get apathy upon apathy within a dining experience, that's where I become pissed off,
mhm,
because like, if I'm there, it's because I want to give you my money to have an experience and
mhm,
have that transaction, but I also want to be a part of what's going on. Usually it's, well, the food is amazing, and the room is great, and the people are really nice that go there. And so the desire to be a part of something like that is pretty human. And so at that point it's like, oh man, what just happened? You neglected to deliver on the promise of some fantastic communal experiences. So,
Yes. And so when we're, introducing these ideas to potential clients that we're helping, and for coaches or owners who are listening right now, this actually relates to the guest who's listening right now. It relates to every side of the conversation to someone right now.
right,
So when we're coaching and consulting potential clients around this conversation, like, I wonder at what point do they understand these elements? So part of my spiel, my branding is like, healthier internal communications with your team, which results in happier guests. Like, we're talking about a really good example right now. So, your guest experience and that question I asked you, how would you react on that initial experience that you had? Because there's things going on behind the scenes that, as a business and a team, are doing and choices they're making and how they're speaking and training and all the things that relate to your experience
right,
at every given moment. And so when we're consulting these owners and these leaders, like, do they understand that? Like, do they understand every piece adds up to that guest
right,
experience? Subconsciously are a lot of touch points. Consciously, we don't often add up all of those. That they don't they go, well, I don't know how that translates to a good guest experience. Well, I invite you to, let's talk about that. Right?
absolutely,
I can relate it for you. Let's talk about it.
yeah. It's interesting. Something that a topic that keeps coming back in my world are another word that you mentioned in that is touch points, but also the concept of the road. In a lot of ways, the road to great guest experiences are to create great employee experiences, right? And I think that that's something that the elite restaurants that I've been able to be a part of and also dine in, like you can feel it. You can feel when those employees are empowered to create great moments, great experiences for their guests. And you can also feel it when they are not. That, like I said, that young lady who's running around and she's trying. Right? Like nobody wakes up and says, I think I'll be average today. I think I'll suck. Right? Nobody does that, really.
Yeah.
They may get there, right? They may be forced into some apathy, but based on their interactions with other people. But I think that, like, valuing the employee experience, right? And almost like taking the idea of culinary mechanic, I've been looking at going, how do I, as somebody who coaches leaders, help them create awesome employee experiences that are reflective of how I want them to interact, with each other, back to their supervisor or their boss, but also to their other employees, so that the other employees that are out in the front are actually then feeling great about how they are being interacted with, and then hence getting all the way to the guest experience. But yeah, it's there's a lot of touch points in that.
Yeah.
I am definitely encouraging more chefs recently to think about how it feels to be an employee working for them.
What do you think the biggest challenge is, to kind of showcase that for leaders? What do you think the biggest challenge is?
Getting leaders to understand that people don't work for them, leaders work for people.
Mhm.
And I think that is always the big shift. And once I find that people are once we sort of turn that corner within a lot of kitchens, all of a sudden there's more teaching happening. There's more, this is why we do this and this is how we fuck it up. Right? And like breaking things down and
Mm,
moving things forward. But I think that getting people to understand that, like, if you have a team, there's a reason, because otherwise you'd be doing it by yourself.
right.
And
Yeah.
you know treating people as an adversary versus a teammate, is really uh, it's
Yeah.
that's the gateway. Like get everybody on your team and pushing in the same direction, and all of a sudden, big huge restaurants fly through the day, and you serve hundreds of people a day and thousands a week, and you high five at the end of the day because that was awesome and that felt good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggest challenge is getting people engaged with
Um,
their people.
I always like to ask leaders why why they like you had to become a leader, right? Like we don't just fall into that. Not really. So I always like to ask leaders why do they like to lead? Why and how would they like to lead? And when I talk about this self-awareness thing, it's like yes, we have these foundational things that we can do and develop this kind of journey for these leaders to get them there, but it starts with asking them lots and lots of questions like, why do you think you do these things? Where does it come from? What would you like to, like? It's really digging within themselves, and I do it within myself. I do it with myself in my own business. Why am I
Right.
doing this? Right. And generally, when I ask those questions, they're reminded. I remind them. I help remind them their why, and kind of show them their skills that they have as leaders. We all need reminders. I need reminders. Simon needs reminders. We all need reminders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like I said earlier, I love being able to break down some of these things because for me, again, I kind of view them almost as tools in my toolbox.
Mhm.
Um, but I think understanding what's underneath that,
Yes.
right? How all those pieces fit together is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, Here's a different question for you. You ready?
Yes.
Um, I've been talking with people a lot lately about the concept of sort of winning your day. And so I guess I want to know what's a win in your day? Like day in, day out. What's a win?
Well, it might be a little cliche, but it's if I have helped someone in their own journey at their work, I think is very rewarding to me.
Nice.
So I, when I'm at work, let's say like in past when I was at work, I'm constantly working on myself. And so I could show up to work and let's say have a disagreement with a coworker or don't really appreciate their style of how they work or whatever. But I have to choose how I respond and react to that person. Right? I have to take control of how I'm going to respond. And so if I'm able to take control of myself and how I respond, and then it helps them, like we see the transformation. And I'm like, oh my God, I took control of my thoughts and I was actually able to deliver something helpful for them. That's a win.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I after so many years of being a very work obsessed person, right? Definite workaholic to my core.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, getting the opportunity to do different things, creating content, doing a podcast, advising and consulting people, I've really like simple isn't the right word, but I found if I am able to finish at the time that I tell my wife or that I tell myself that I'm going to finish for the day, man, I just won because that was something that just killed me for years, both internally and externally, right? Like if you, my partner in the world, she dealt with a lot of I'll be home at 7 and I'd show up at 9, but also like for me, like getting to just leave leave work, whether that be outside the house or here in the house, leave work still intact and not as my English friend says, completely knackered, not completely destroyed, where I now need way more than the 12 or 13 hours that I have before my next shift or my next day.
Yeah.
I now need 24 or 30 hours to recover and, spending monumental amounts of energy. I,
Yeah.
I think that it's just phenomenal. Just a
Yeah.
complete shift. But yeah, I I revel in the days where I'm able to affect some positive change in other people or help them have some fun in working as hard as I know that many of us do.
Yeah.
I think that's always been a big thing for me. I'm like, if you're not having fun in this industry,
Yes.
like pardon my language, but get the fuck out. Like if you're not having fun, go do something else, man.
I know.
You
I like to
know?
incorporate that with the whole, if you can't take the heat out, get out of the kitchen. I think that should be like part of the heat, right? Like have fun.
Yeah, if being burnt all day is not fun, get
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
One of my I remember like it was yesterday. It was probably 2018, and I was sitting having an after work beer with a good friend of mine, and he was growing miserable, more and more miserable, and he was the general manager of this really big restaurant, 500 seats. It's just this megalith, and upper management was messing with him a little bit, and we were going through a hard time staffing wise because it was huge. And he just looked at me and he's like, ah, just other frustration. And I said, I think you have to move on. He's like, what? I'm like, I think you need to save 10% of your daily energy and start looking for a job. And he's like, why? I'm like, because you're not enjoying this anymore, right? You're not bringing like the gusto and the passion and all the like energy that you did 6 years ago when I met you. And so, how does that affect? Like, how are you affecting? You're the leader. You are the general manager of this massive restaurant. You have three other managers on your side, and three sous chef, a chef and two sous chefs that you're all interacting. But you're bringing this leadership that is almost toxic because you're unhappy and you're not having fun. And he went, huh, I never thought about it like that. And I said, well, all I got to say is if you're not enjoying this, it's not bringing you joy and you're not having fun. And then how do you think that that's affecting the other 50 people around you?
Yeah. It's so true.
and it, and I think that, that's our responsibility as leaders, is to look around and go, how is this? How are people feeling about being around me? And how do and the only way to almost safeguard that is make sure that you feel good about doing what you're doing. And so
Yeah.
I think fun is like the leveler there, you can work hard, but if you're having a good time, sure, it's great.
It is. It is. Yes. And life is meant to be fun. And when it becomes forceful and like not good, it's something's got to give in your life.
Yeah,
Something's got to change.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very true.
And at this point in my life, it's the work that gives before I give. I'm like, if I'm not digging it, nope, I'm not. I'm just not doing it right now. you
Mhm.
know, uh, which is exactly why I do this podcast. Because when I wake up and I know that I have a, an episode recording that morning, it's like, here we go. This is gonna. I usually get to like with you. I get to connect with somebody new, and that's good special stuff, right, in the world because there's so many things to absorb. And I mean, I like the opportunity to absorb them, I guess is the biggest thing. So,
That's right.
well, gosh, what a wonderful conversation around being human and the relationships that really can be formed and how I think how we relate to the things we do. So
Mhm.
I just really want to thank you for coming and playing. in our little sandbox of the world. In the show notes, we're going to put your LinkedIn and your Instagram handles so that people can find you with CS Consulting, um, and make sure that they can reach out. And if they need a little help, um, kind of finding their why, I think that's a pretty solid thing. Um, then they can do that. To the rest of you out there, thank you so much for listening and watching, because we're on YouTube. Woohoo! And find us wherever you find your podcasts. And I just got to say thank you once again and have a great one.
Thank you. You too, Simon. Thank you.